A fictional scene from a late archaic burial and occupation at the Old Manhattan Creek Complex, Oscoda, Michigan, by Dennis M. Morrison. This story was originally published as a small history booklet and complimentary for Ed Glatfeldy's history class field trip of June 5th, 1992, published by Treasure Cove Publications. By way of introduction, I must tell you that the Brant Burial Site, at the Brant Burial Site, the state of Michigan excavated 11 burials which were dated at approximately 1140 BC. This would have put them in a time period known in our state as the Late Archaic. Subsequently, 3 more burials have been discovered at this site, suggesting that this important ancient cemetery is much more extensive than first thought. I estimate from my work in the area that some 30 individuals still lie buried at the Brant Burial Site. And not far from the Brant Burial Site is the Goodwin Gresham area, where I discovered and excavated the spot where the mineral called red ochre was prepared for use in the burials at the Brant site. The red ochre was pulverized and placed over the dead body and the grave itself, as it simulated the color of life. In this fictional account, both of these sites are brought together in scenes that could have very truly happened and are based on what we know of the Late Archaic in Michigan. Also, one of these burials recovered was of a child about 10 years of age, and it is that interment that I've decided to base this account upon. So without further comment, here's that account, which may have happened on the banks of the Manhattan Creek in what would one day be Oscoda, Michigan, some 6,000 years ago. That sacred place is around a bend in the sluggish river. The encampment where the clan stays when use of the burial ground is required is also around that bend. They have no fear of the dead, but the burial ground is out of sight of their dwellings, so that the dead will not look on the living with envy. The people visit their deceased family and ancestors whenever hunting brings them near, or when they are forced, as on this occasion, to bring a dear one to the village of the departed. Death is the ultimate scourge to this band of hunters and gatherers. They're a tight-knit clan, completely dependent on each other for survival. Everyone, elderly, adults, and children, have their special roles to fulfill in making certain that all of the tribe's needs are met. At this point in time, there are 23 in the tribe. Their numbers fluctuate heavily depending on disease, availability of food, and infant mortality. They comb the streams and lake shores for the nutritious commodities that they need for survival. This place on the high bluff beside the slow waters is very special. It is a place of both sadness and joy. They come here to prepare their dead for burial and to commend the beloved spirits into the infinite hands to be transported into the afterworld. Much thought was given by the elders of time now long past in the selection of this burial ground. It is the highest land anywhere to be seen in the area, making it closer to Gitchi-Manitou, or their god. While the bluff is very sandy, the forest is at its edge. The air is scented at all seasons of the year with the pungent aroma of pine and cedar. Deer frequently come out of the woods to eat the tall grass growing on the graves. The beautiful birds of spring seem to come here to sing their sweetest songs, to the unspoken delight of those who are at rest. This, however, is one of those disheartened occasions. They were hunting moose when a freak accident caused the death of a boy who had only seen 10 summers. Now that young boy lies in a small bark lodge, waiting to meet those loved ones who had gone before, and special preparations are underway. There are the occasional sobs of a mournful mother filtering through the chilled morning air, and not far from the somber little lodge, the father and eldest brother sit cross-legged on the ground. Working from abstract forms of flint, they are busy fashioning fine arrowheads to accompany the young one into the next world. They are lean and they are muscular. Their black hair is striking contrast as it lies draped over the reddish skin of their shoulders. A breechclout is all they are wearing as diligently they strike the flint with hammers of deer antler. The dead boy's uncle is the tribe's shaman or holy man. He takes care of those items used to cover the body. The shaman had selected the finest furs to wrap the small form in. These are stowed away in a little lodge until the moment when they would be needed. The shaman walks over to a sandy spot that he remembers well, and kneeling he begins to scoop away the sand. And before long his hands lift out a small parcel from the hole. It was one of many larger parcels. These contain red ochre, which has been cached away. It is a very sacred object to the clan. He recovered the remaining parcels and then began to scoop out a depression in the sand. Unwrapping the parcel, he set several good-sized lumps of ochre in the depression, and from a birch bark parcel he took a stone knife as well as several grinding stones, and with these tools the shaman began to pulverize the ochre. The ochre is deep red, and it simulates the color of life. It is the sole duty of the shaman to powder the ochre and spread it over the body before interment. As he busily worked at the ochre, the mother came beside him and knelt. He smiled tenderly at his sister. From a pouch on her side she took a small stone, and the forces of nature had by chance shaped the stone like a bird in flight. She had found it shortly after the young boy's birth and had intended it for him to have when he became a man. The mother believed the bird would be his guardian, and the shaman took the stone from her with the intent of making it one of the grave goods. And as his sister walked away, the father called to him and motioned for him to come over. The shaman rose, and the little bird-like stone fell into the red ochre. The father and son showed the shaman two beautiful arrows freshly finished. He gave an approving smile and returned to preparing the red ochre. As all this was transpiring, two cousins were at the village of the dead. Earlier, the shaman had marked out a spot where the boy would be buried. Carefully using their hands and baskets, the cousins dug deep into Mother Earth. They cleared the floor of the pit, making it as flat as possible. At the village, having filled the basket with red ochre, the shaman covered the unused material with sand, then lifted the basket and began walking along the river bank to the burial ground where the cousins were just finishing up their work. Walking along the shaded woodland path, the shaman drank in his surroundings. On other circumstances, this would be a perfect day. Then he smiled at the thought and considered that this was a perfect day to enter the next world. Once in a while the sun peeked through the pine branches, warming his face, and soon the shaman was in sight of the cousins, and they rushed forward to help him with his heavy basket of ochre. One of the young men took the basket as the other led the way to the pit. The shaman looked at it and then hopped into the bottom of the pit as the basket was carefully handed down to him. Generously he covered the floor and walls of the pit with the red ochre, handed the basket back up, and then climbed out. A quick glance at the sky showed that the sun was now quite high. He had one more detail to check. Joined by the cousins, the trio walked back towards the encampment, but then veered down another path to a small clearing. In the clearing, a half-dozen men and women were busy preparing a platform of pine and cedar boughs which would bear the young boy from the encampment to the village of the dead. The shaman looked it over carefully. He checked each section bound with woven plant fiber. He uttered some special directions to the group, who were quick in responding to his respected spiritual advice. When the bed of greenery was completed, he instructed that it should be carried to the small lodge at the encampment and placed inside. The shaman returned to the encampment alone. Along the way he found the father and mother. He led them to the lodge and opened the door of skins to allow them entrance. The shaman followed close by. This was a moment of preparation for the close family, supervised by the holy man. And after long moments of silence, the green platform was quickly brought in, and the attendants rushed back out. The father was handed the fine skin robes, and he arranged them on the green bed. The father and shaman lifted the boy from the sandy floor and placed him on the robes, and then the mother carefully folded the limbs so that he was in a fetal position. This done, the shaman picked up a small basket of red ochre and anointed the boy's body with it. With help from the mother and father, the shaman folded the skins over the young boy and secured them about him with cords made of hemp. The moment was at hand. The shaman stepped out and the clan was already assembled. He selected 4 strong young men to bear the platform to the village of the dead, and they entered the lodge, 2 on each side, and bore up the platform. As they left the small structure, they hefted the platform upon their shoulders, and led by the shaman, began the march down that wooded path to the burial ground. The others fell in behind, first the parents, then the brothers and sisters, and then the remaining clan members. As they walked slowly beside the river, sad dirges were chanted, and the mother cried profusely, but the father bore the deep nagging sorrow proudly within his aching heart. The path led upwards towards the bluff, and the closer the group came, the louder the lamenting became, until at the graveside the wailing reached a feverish pitch. And with a single hand raised by the shaman, the group fell into silence except for the muted sobs of the mother. The bed of boughs was laid beside the grave, and the bearers gently picked up the fur-wrapped body and sat it upright in the pit. The shaman made certain that the boy was aligned so that his face was towards the rising sun, his back to the setting sun in the west. This was the path their souls traveled to the land of the dead, a land that lay in the west, far beyond the great plains, beyond the ocean, beyond the earth. The shaman was again handed the basket of ochre, and the pit was profusely covered with the blessed mineral. This done, the shaman uttered words to the infinite God on behalf of the young boy. Finally, a small leather packet containing 2 arrowheads was laid in next to the body. Each clan member in turn dumped it in a basket of sand, and then the cousins who had dug the pit finished by filling it in. Simple offerings had been brought with them, pieces of flint, fur, and in some cases stone amulets. Carved wooden bowls were left on the other graves in respect and to provide for the needs of those already gone. Now, a last look was cast by the parents and the shaman to the grave, and then sadly the procession walked away. It was done until the burial grounds were once more needed. And for several days following, the clan hunted and fished near their burial ground. Then, as the parents became more settled into their loss, the hunters moved on to follow the game. This is a story that could have been. You see, I discovered the red ochre at the Goodwin Gresham Site, only not even half a mile from the Brant burial site. And I discovered it quite by accident because I'd worked this site for many years. I'd been shown the site by my dear friend Jerry Wagner, friend and mentor. And it was after a rain that I was visiting the site one day, and the sands there were covered with anthills, and all of them were the normal color except one, which was blood red. And I got my shovel out of the car, which was parked not too far away, and I began digging down, and I followed the red trail left by the ants to the ground, about almost 2 feet underground, when I hit this pocket of red ochre that had been left there, the pocket I talk about in my story. And in that red ochre, of which there were about enough to fill 2 1-gallon buckets, there were some small grinding stones, small chert knives, and a little stone that looked like a bird in shape. And I mentioned that bird-shaped stone in here. Later, I had contacted the state archaeologist and a number of others who worked for him, and they helped me prepare an article about this site and its connection to the Brant burial site, which did indeed appear in the Michigan Archaeologist several years later. At some point, I will record that article and also put it here on YouTube. But that's the story of a fictional burial at the Old Manhattan Creek Complex in Oscoda, Michigan, that may have actually been pretty close to the way things were when an individual died in the late Archaic here in Michigan. Thank you.